you will hear a woman talking to some students about her job. First, in the exam, you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to give a talk in this series of employment lectures. I'm here this evening to tell you about my job. I'm going to tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and what I hope to do in the future. OK, well, I'm a police officer. I've been in the police for just over 5 years, and part of my job is to give talks to students about police work. People often ask why I joined the police, so maybe I'll start there. I've always been interested in law and order, so I went to study law at university. But when I got there, I realised that I was more interested in the practical side of law than the theory. So I applied to work with the police force in my spare time. Then, as soon as I graduated, I was accepted for training.
Before you hear the next part of the talk, in the exam you will have 20 seconds to look at questions 5 to 10. Listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
As you know, our job is to protect the public from criminals and defend the law. So obviously, the police force has to work every day of the week, day and night. This means we're often at work when everyone else is relaxing with friends and family, and we can't always be around for special occasions like birthdays and New Year's Eve. On top of that, we have a lot of extra work at weekends, especially when there's a football match and the fans are out celebrating. So, our working hours are one disadvantage of police work. A lot of the time we have to work with the public to avoid problems, and we get special training for that. But we can't always prevent trouble. So, another disadvantage of the job is the danger. I mean, we know that some of the people we have to arrest will attack us.
Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Now for the advantages. Well, one of the advantages is that police work is well paid. As I've said, it's a difficult job, and police officers work hard for their pay. But there are many more advantages. For example, sometimes the work's fun, especially when we have to protect famous people from their own fans. I've met quite a lot of celebrities in my job, and I must say I enjoy seeing them close up and finding out what they're really like as people. But for me, the biggest advantage is the job satisfaction. Speaking for myself, I would say I get the most job satisfaction when I help someone, or solve a problem in a community. And in the future, I'd like to train to be a detective. I think I'd be good at that.
In the exam, you will have half a minute to check your answers.
You will hear a student housing officer giving a talk to a group of university students concerning dormitory renovations. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
After months of discussion and planning, we are very pleased to announce that the renovations will be made to the west wing of the university dormitories. Now, with this good news comes some bad, as there will be some disruptions to your living environment. But we think once you hear our plans, you're going to be very happy with what we will be doing. Firstly, if you'll just take a moment to look at the plans we gave you as you came in. Firstly, on the eastern side of the wing, you'll notice that there will be a change in the existing front entrance. It will be removed to another location on the opposite side of the wing. I'm sure that a lot of you will be glad for that, as our present configuration didn't allow for enough lighting. With the renovations will also come the removal of the existing staircase, but not the column beside it. Now, as we move west, we come to the location of the new security entrance. As with the old one, there will still be a need for some new lighting, so we're planning to install a number of overhead lights, which will make entering and exiting safer for you all. It'll be at this new security entrance that the new wall will be built to a 2-story height. This gives you an idea of the size of the construction. Overall, the width will be around 6 meters, with the overall length being around 10. Which I'm sure many of you are going to really enjoy. More room for all of you living in the West Wing. Are there any questions?
Before you listen to the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now, as I mentioned, there will be some issues we will have to overcome regarding the renovations. The first will be relocating some of you to new dormitories. 30 students will be moving for a total of 6 weeks. Now, of those who will be moving, you will be distributed to 3 other temporary locations, the North, South, and East dorm wings. 10 students will be relocated to each wing. This means that some of you are going to need to get packing. Don't worry about your new location. We're doing all we can to make your new temporary dorms as comfortable as possible. In fact, as I speak, we're making steps to ensure that you have study desks, lamps, and computer facilities, and all of the other facilities you require to successfully continue on with your studies. We're even repainting several of the rooms in the preparation for your arrival. The changes to your dorms will be starting within a week. If you have any problems, don't hesitate to contact my office. Now, I'm sure some of you have questions. I'm happy to answer them now.
That is the end of section 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3 on page 69. Section 3. You will hear 2 university students, Phil and Stella, talking to their tutor about their research project. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27 on pages 69 and 70. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27.
Come in. Ah, yes, Stella. Is Phil there too? Good. Come on in. OK, so you're here to discuss your research project. Have you decided what to focus on? You were thinking of something about the causes of mood changes, weren't you?
Yes, but the last time we saw you, you suggested we narrowed it down to either the effects of weather or urban environment. So we've decided to focus on the effects of weather.
Right, that's more manageable. So, your goal is, Phil?
To prove the hypothesis, no. To investigate the hypothesis that the weather has an effect on a person's mood.
Good. And what's your thesis, Stella?
Well, our thesis is that in general, when the weather's good, it has a positive effect on a person's mood, and bad weather has a negative effect.
Can you define your terms here? For example, what do you mean by good and bad?
OK, well, good would be sunny, warm weather, and bad would be when it's cold and cloudy or raining.
And how would you define an effect on a person's mood? What would you be looking to find?
An effect on the way a person feels.
A change in the way they feel, like from feeling happy and optimistic to sad and depressed.
Right. And what sort of weather variables will you be looking at?
Oh, sunshine, temperature, cloudiness, precipitation, among others. It'll depend a bit what the weather's like when we do the survey.
Fine. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, what about background reading? I gave you some suggestions. Did you manage to read any of it?
Yes, we read the Ross Vickers article, the one comparing the groups of American Marines training in summer and winter. That's quite relevant to our study. It was interesting because the Marines who were training in the cold winter conditions tried to cheer themselves up by thinking of warm places, but it didn't really work.
Yes, they were trying to force themselves to have a positive mental outlook, but in fact it had the opposite effect, and they ended up in a very negative state of mind.
And we found some more research by someone who wasn't on the reading list you gave us, George Whiteborn. He compared people living in 3 countries with very different climatic conditions. Actually, he looked at several things, not just the weather. But he found some people's reactions to bad weather were much worse than others, and it was linked to how stressed they were generally. The weather on its own didn't have such a significant effect on mood.
And we looked at a paper by
Haverton.
Yeah, he broke weather up into about 15 or 16 categories and did qualitative and quantitative research. He found that humans respond to conditions in the weather with immediate responses, such as fear or amazement. But these responses can also be linked to associations from their earlier life, such as a particular happy or sad event.
Did you have a look at Stanfield's work?
Yes. It was interesting because the type of questions he asked was similar to what we were planning to use in our survey.
Yes.
He asked people how they were feeling on days with good and bad weather. He found the biggest factors seemed to be the humidity. Moods were most negative on days with a lot of rainfall. Long periods without sunshine had some effect, but nothing like as much.
That could be quite a useful model for your project.
Yes, we thought so too. Although we can't continue our survey for as long as he did. He did his over a 6-month period.
You now have some time to look at questions 28 to 30 on page 70. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
Right. Well, you've made quite a good start. So, where are you going from here?
Well, we've already made the questionnaire we're going to use for the survey. It's quite short, just 8 questions. We're aiming to survey 20 people over a period of 3 months from October to December.
We can't specify the actual dates yet because it depends on the weather. We want to do the survey on days with a range of different weather conditions. and we'll just be working on campus, so our data will only be statistically sound for the student population here.
That's okay. Have you thought how you'll determine what will constitute each aspect of weather, and how many you're looking at?
We decided on 4. The amount of sunshine, cloudiness, temperature and precipitation. We thought we might use the internet to get data on weather conditions on the days we do the survey, but we haven't found the information we need, so we might have to measure it ourselves. We'll see.
Then we've got to analyse the results, and we'll do that using a spreadsheet, giving numeric values to answers. And then, of course, we have to present our findings to the class, and we want to make it quite an interactive session. We want to involve the class in some way in the presentation, maybe by trying to create different climatic conditions in the classroom, but we're still thinking about it.
I see. Well, that sounds as if you're on the right lines. Now, what I'd suggest that you think about, in addition to the work you...
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on the current and future use of mobile phones. You now have 30 seconds to read questions 31 to 35.
Okay, now today we're looking at changes in communication, and specifically changes that have just happened or are likely to happen in the next few years. Key to this is the mobile phone, which is increasingly being seen as an all-purpose system rather than just a phone. If you only use your phone for texting and making calls now, you will be amazed at how you'll be using it in the future. The technology has been developed for a range of other uses. For example, phones could be used so that if you are meeting someone and they get lost, you could send them a map of your location to help them. This will save all those complicated explanations over the phone and our poor friends or colleagues trying to drive and find out where they are at the same time. And if you get bored waiting, or if you're traveling, for example, you will soon be able to see TV news on your phone as it is actually being broadcast. This means that you won't have to miss any of your favorites if you are away for a few days. Most people have got used to texting now, and young people send pictures to each other. But what is exciting is the possibility of putting music with them before you send them. And it's not all frivolous. Phones are going to become even more critical in business and education. Some recent developments have a highly practical usage. So, for example, as lecturers, we will be able to send everybody a text to let them know if lectures have been cancelled. And the new phones could have a further use in education, as well as business, as they will enable us to go to any destination, such as when we are doing a field trip, for instance, and from there to send data directly to a computer so that we can access it when we get home. This means we will no longer be limited by what the phone can store.
You now have 30 seconds to read questions 36 to 40.
And it's interesting to look at the different ways that men and women use phones now, as that does affect how the technology will develop. Some research has been done on how people use phones, and some of the results are surprising. One of the increasing usages of mobile phones is to get all sorts of data, such as phone numbers, the weather, train times, etc. And while there's been an attempt to set up connections with things that women might be interested in accessing, it is overwhelmingly men who do this. But what about the traditional use of a phone? To speak to people? I suppose we would predict that it is mainly women who use phones as a method of contact for friends and family, but, in fact, the genders exploit this facility equally. I've spoken about the increased business usages that phones will offer, and I suppose we would associate this usage with men. The survey picked up, though, that women are often working from home or catching up with work in the evenings, so they use phones in this way as much as men do. Most of us are aware we can store photos on our phones. It's an ideal method of capturing a moment wherever you are. Women tend to be the group that keep photos on their phones, but it seems that men use their phones to actually take pictures much more than women do. And of course, all this knowledge affects the marketing that the companies will do in order to sell